It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. I'm Yalda Hakim, live in Beirut. Our top story. Israeli military claims to have killed a number of top Hezbollah commanders in an airstrike here in the Lebanese capital. Reported to be among them Ibrahim Akil on the US most wanted list for decades. Tonight, the crisis is being discussed at an emergency UN meeting. We'll bring you the latest on the efforts to prevent a regional war.
Also coming up on Sky News at 10, condemned as a monster, on par with Jimmy Savile and Harvey Weinstein. Alleged victims of former Harrods owner Mohammed Al-Fayed speak out. A freeze on freebies. The Prime Minister and senior ministers say they will no longer accept donations to pay for clothes. Plus, we'll bring you a special report from the Mexican city ravaged by a deadly civil war within one of the world's biggest drugs cartels. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight.
Good evening from the Lebanese capital, Beirut, a city targeted today for a third time this week by an Israeli attack. The IDF say they've killed a number of top Hezbollah commanders in an airstrike, including Ibrahim Akil, who had been on the US most wanted list for decades. It comes after a week of escalating tensions, with dozens killed in Lebanon during a series of exploding device attacks on Hezbollah members. From here in Beirut, our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports.
This is what an Israeli military targeted strike looks like minutes afterwards. It's the southern suburbs of Lebanon's capital, Beirut, and there's mayhem. Pictures taken by residents show the strike appears to have flattened an entire high-rise block. Cars flipped, others caked in grey dust. Dozens began the search for survivors, with several trapped. The attack's the most deadly Israeli airstrike on the capital in nearly 2 decades. This area is heavily populated. Lebanese television stations aired pictures of homes. This suburb is packed with shops, markets and apartments, but it's also strictly controlled by the fighting group and considered a Hezbollah stronghold. The Israeli military say the strike killed a wanted senior Hezbollah commander and a group of his elite force. Ibrahim Akil is one of America's most wanted, the second member of the fighting group's top military body to be killed in the capital in 2 months.
At the time of the strike, Akil and the commanders of the Radwan forces were gathered underground, under a residential building in the heart of the Dakhya in Beirut, hiding among Lebanese civilians, using them as human shields. They were in the middle of planning more terror attacks against Israeli civilians.
As people were hurriedly rushed to already overstretched hospitals for treatment, the country's health ministry said there were children among the dead, injured and missing. Army checkpoints were quickly established, but the bomb site is controlled by Hezbollah and access heavily restricted, particularly for foreign media.
We've been told to leave the area. Our pictures have been deleted. We're very close to the bomb site, but there's obviously tempers are at red rage point, and everyone, well, certainly the media, is being cleared out of the area for now.
The airstrike came shortly after a volley of nearly 200 Hezbollah rockets into northern Israel, many of them intercepted by the Iron Dome. Tens of thousands of people on both sides of the border have fled their homes as these tit-for-tat attacks have ramped up and up. But this was one of the heaviest days yet in nearly a year. The Israeli military has been burying its dead too. Hundreds gathered for the funeral of one of 2 Israeli soldiers killed on the border the day before. But Hezbollah's military command and weapons have been systematically targeted for months now, and they've suffered some strategic losses. But there's been a marked increase in exchanges over the past 24 hours. The Israeli airstrike in the capital has just sent the tensions soaring. The Lebanese caretaker government was holding an emergency cabinet meeting just before the airstrike, with ministers already incensed over the 2 days of pager and handheld radio explosions, which they blame Israel for too.
Things are escalating by the minute. We can see that there is more tension, there is more provocation. And it's very unfortunate because us as a government, along with all the diplomatic channels, we have been doing our best the past few months to get to a peaceful solution.
It's a genocidal, it's indiscriminate, it's a break of and violation of the international humanitarian law and every other law.
It's a war crime, and it was not something that would pass easily, trying to kill 3,000 or 4,000 civilians.
The Israeli military is claiming the Beirut bombing as a major success, saying without providing any evidence that the commander and his team were planning to attack northern Israel. But Lebanon is going through back-to-back days and nights of coping with major emergency after major emergency. Tensions are already inflamed, and this latest Israeli attack is being seen as hugely incendiary. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
And Alex is here with me in Beirut. And Alex, I mean, this is a country at war. You've been out and about all day speaking to people. Are they preparing for a full-scale war now?
They don't really see much difference, to be honest. It looks like war, it sounds like war, it feels like war. Hezbollah is absolutely reeling. They're clearly on the back foot. The Israelis have taken out a number of their military command structure. They've absolutely hammered their weapons cache and their weapon stores and their rocket launchers on the border, the most intense bombardment between the two in a year, and certainly today the most intense since October the 8th. But it's not just Hezbollah that's being hit, right? This latest airstrike was right in the middle of a residential area. A lot of this country hates and reviles Hezbollah. It was in a Hezbollah stronghold, but there are clearly civilians also involved, women, children amongst the missing, dead and injured. So there's a whole load of people who are beginning to be very, very angry. I mean, even going down there, getting close to the Hezbollah officials around there, the ordinary people are really angry, very frightened. We got very surrounded by them. They wanted to take our filming cards. They threatened to punch and hit us. No foreign journalists are allowed down there at the moment. The access is very strictly controlled. The Lebanese government, which is not Hezbollah, is also incensed, calling the three attacks war crimes, indiscriminatory. You know, the Prime Minister and the Lebanese Foreign Minister have marched off to the UN to demand that they take action. The health infrastructure is actually on its knees, with doctors saying they couldn't cope before this emergency. It's the whole of the Lebanese people, Lebanon as well as Hezbollah, who feel that they're being collectively punished right now and who are really suffering the consequences. And the big consequence is this tips into a big regional war, because remember, Hezbollah is allied with Iran, one of the two regional superpowers, and the so-called axis of resistance with fighting groups in Iraq, Yemen and Syria. So we're really on the edge, if not about to teeter into it, unless something happens to bring everything back from the brink. At the moment, that doesn't seem likely, especially as it's linked to a Gaza ceasefire, and we're nowhere near that yet.
Yeah, a really dangerous moment. And to just pick up on the point that Alex has just made, let's go straight to the United Nations Security Council. They're meeting, having an emergency session this evening to discuss the situation here in Lebanon. We can bring in our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who has been following developments. And Dom, I was just speaking to Alex there about how tense the situation here is, and really whether there can be a de-escalation now, given what we're seeing at the Security Council. Is there any hope that this whole situation could be calmed down?
Well, definitely not from what we're hearing from the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon. His country has had an absolute pummeling diplomatically in the last hour or so in this UN Security Council emergency meeting, not just from its enemies, from Syria, from Iran, but also from allies expressing real concern about the direction of events in the Middle East, and also from UN officials, particularly humanitarian ones, deeply concerned about what they say could be a breach of international humanitarian law, the use of these pages to kill and wound and maim people in Lebanon, including women and children. But in response to that, the Israeli ambassador to the UN has pushed back pretty defiantly, Danny Danon, saying that if Hezbollah does not retreat from the border, the northern border, back to north of the Litani River through diplomatic efforts, Israel will use any means to defend citizens, and hinting that however bad we think it is at the moment, things could get worse, because he's saying that Israel will do whatever it takes to return Israelis to homes in the north. So a sense that Israel's tactics, which have raised huge concern and outrage in certain quarters, could be just the beginning. And I think probably the most explicit kind of explanation so far from an Israeli official as to why this is happening. It is part of a push, diplomatically, but also militarily, to push Hezbollah back to the Litani River. Now, that's the river, I think, 40 miles north of the northern border, to which Hezbollah was meant to have retreated in the wake of the 2006 Hezbollah-Israeli war, but has pushed south from and is now using the area south of that to menace and threaten Israel. Israel seems determined to push it back there, but I think there is huge concern about the tactics it's using and the real risk that those tactics could upend the region and tip it into a much deeper war, which could draw in Iran, but also America and Israel's other allies. So real concern about this, but actually no sign at all at the moment that Israel's thinking twice and pulling back from the brink.
Dom, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there on the UN Security Council meeting and, of course, the diplomatic flurry that's taking place. Well, we are watching all of the developments here. The correspondents are offering their analysis and reports in the coming days, and we'll be following all of the developments. But for now, Gillian, back to you in the studio.
Yalda, thank you. The former owner of Harrods, Mohammed Al-Fayed, has been described as a monster who cherry-picked his victims after being accused of overseeing one of the worst cases of corporate sexual exploitation the world has ever seen. The billionaire died last year at the age of 94. Today, lawyers representing some of the women he's accused of assaulting, as well as one of the alleged victims, finally spoke up. Sky's Laura Bundock has more, and a warning: her report does contain some distressing details.
He was always a ruthless rule breaker, but the accusations now against Mohammed Al-Fayed are far more serious. He was, say several former employees, a serial rapist.
Mohammed Al-Fayed, my boss, the person I work for, pushed himself onto me. I fell to the floor with him still on top of me, but I managed to kick free and free myself. I ran towards the door. I told him I was meeting my father for dinner and he would be worried that I was late. He just laughed at me. He then composed himself and he told me in no uncertain terms that I was never to breathe a word of this to anyone. If I did, I would never work in London again, and he knew where my family lived.
Al-Fayed's death last year has empowered women to speak out. For them, the dream job at Harrods was hell.
This case combines some of the most horrific elements of the cases involving Jimmy Savile, Jeffrey Epstein, and Harvey Weinstein. Mohammed Al-Fayed was a monster. But he was a monster enabled by a system that pervaded Harrods.
Al-Fayed sought British society and celebrity, and Harrods was his crown jewel. But he ran the flagship store with fear and control. One former member of his management team has spoken to Sky News anonymously.
He would cherry-pick people from the shop floor. If you had blonde hair and brown eyes, you were favoured. He used to say, "I want that one up in my office now."
She would warn the women before they met him.
I would sit her down and I would say, "I need to let you know what you are walking into. It's suddenly a pay rise and you'll be invited to expensive events and lavish with expensive gifts, but really you need to be aware of something. I said you will get invited to Park Lane and parties where there will be lots of rich men, and you would be invited to sleep with people."
But Al-Fayed didn't just invite these girls, he forced himself on them. Their stories are deeply disturbing.
They involve doctors administering invasive gynecological exams as a condition of employment for some of the employees who were targeted by Mohammed Al-Fayed for sexual abuse by him. The allegations also include the unauthorized disclosure to Mohammed Al-Fayed of the examination results of employees he targeted for sexual abuse.
Harrods was sold by Al-Fayed in 2010. The new owners have apologised, saying they are utterly appalled by the allegations of abuse and have also acknowledged the business at the time failed employees who were his victims. Mohammed Al-Fayed faced accusations of sexual assault throughout his life, but only in death are the voices of his victims being heard. They want justice. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
The allegations about Mr Al-Fayed have triggered calls for a reckoning in business culture in the UK, similar to that prompted by the Jimmy Savile and Harvey Weinstein scandals in the world of showbiz. Sky's business correspondent Adele Robinson has more.
He operated in the upper echelons of the business world.
I hope you enjoy it.
Mohammed Al-Fayed, a man comfortable in a male-dominated corporate landscape. Now, multiple allegations of sexual and physical assault against the late Harrods owner have shone a spotlight on corporate culture and what, if anything's changed.
There's not enough women at the top levels of corporations. Not enough women, either in the UK or in the United States, who are at the top level, let's say Fortune 500 companies, other large corporations. That has to change. And maybe we'd have less sexual abuse by people in power if the people in power were women.
Gloria Allred, representing alleged victims of Al-Fayed, also defended those of Harvey Weinstein, a man abusing his power at the top of Hollywood, where non-disclosure agreements or NDAs were used too.
It was the legal threat that kept me silent far more effectively than Harvey.
Zelda Perkins, one of Weinstein's alleged victims, says it all begins with an NDA.
I think they're the complete root of the problem. They're one of the most prolifically used tools to not only enable abuse, but to continue abuse, because women cannot share their stories, which means that they don't know what's going on around them. They're totally isolated. They can't warn other people.
It was only 6 years ago the President's Club scandal broke, a men's-only London charity dinner where waitresses were allegedly groped. Last year, allegations of sexual assault at the CBI, Confederation of British Industry, too. Sexism has gone nowhere, some sectors worse than others.
A report this year said efforts to tackle it here in the city were going at a snail's pace and that women were experiencing shocking levels of sexual harassment and bullying. Widespread sexism, it's pretty clear, is very much not a thing of the past.
Despite more women at the top, many are still afraid to speak out amid an ingrained culture that's failing women in the workplace. Adele Robinson, Sky News.
Laura Bundock joins me now from outside Harrods in London's Knightsbridge. And Laura, the man at the centre of these allegations is dead. So where does this go from here?
Well, Harrods has settled some recent claims, paid compensation and admitted liability for the actions of Mohammed Al-Fayed. But we understand that in the last couple of days, more people have now come forward. The person I spoke to today worked here for several years at the peak of Al-Fayed's power. And she, like many other women, describes a man consumed with control and ego, who basically acted and behaved like he was above the law. She told me how he, surrounded by his security, would patrol the shop floor like a predator, picking out young, intelligent, attractive women and summoning them to his upstairs office with the prospect of promotion. And we're only now really understanding exactly what that meant. Dozens of women have come forward with allegations of serial rape, attempted rape or sexual abuse, but the lawyers representing them believe there could be many, many anymore. Al-Fayed was always this divisive character, a very, very divisive figure, obsessed with the royal family and having high-profile connections, this billionaire businessman infamous for his controversy. He never faced charges when he was alive, but it's now posthumously he's facing these accusations of one of the worst ever cases of sexual exploitation. He can't stand trial, but the police can investigate and look at who knew what and who was working here at the time and whether, more seriously, anyone was complicit in it.
Laura, thank you. The mother of a young woman who took her own life has told Sky News that the country's mental health services are not fit for purpose after her daughter's death while staying in an eating disorder clinic. Sky's communities correspondent Becky Johnson reports, and a warning that there are some distressing images coming up.
She loved life, she loved people, and then she had a darker side, her eating disorder side.
This was how Melissa Parrish spent the last 3 years of her life, in a vegetative state following a suicide attempt. She died aged 27. She tried to take her own life within 4 hours of admission at this eating disorder clinic in London. An inquest found a ligature point that should have been removed had been left in her room. Her family say before they left, it was very clear she was distressed.
If it looks like somebody who is on the brink of doing whatever they can to hurt themselves, step in. Don't respect their autonomy and let them kill themselves. Step in and prevent it.
Their anger and disbelief heightened because the Trust's chief executive is Claire Murdoch, the NHS England lead on mental health.
I just feel across so many levels that mental health treatment isn't fit for purpose in this country.
The Trust said it's sorry for any mistakes that were made. Claire Murdoch said our thoughts and sympathies remain with the loved ones of Melissa Parrish, adding there is further progress needed to ensure that everyone gets the support they need. Melissa's family believe the trauma that led to her suicide began as a teenager. They blame an inpatient stay here at the Huntercombe Hospital in Maidenhead. She was admitted aged 15 for 12 weeks, but ended up being forced to stay for 14 months.
She started self-harming, and then when they told her that she wouldn't be coming home after 12 weeks, I think she just died. She stopped eating.
The Huntercombe Hospital has since been shut down after dozens of former patients came forward to allege inhumane treatment following a Sky News investigation. Melissa's mother says it left her daughter with a fear of being locked up.
She was destroyed as a human being, and she wouldn't engage with any treatment because she was so scared of going back to hospital.
Eli Investments Group, that owned the hospital when Melissa was there, said their thoughts are with her family. They now have to live knowing their daughter was failed, always wondering if she'd still be here. If only she'd had better care. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Central London.
And if you've been affected by the issues raised in our report, help is available from the Samaritans 24 hours a day. You can contact them by calling 116 123 or emailing joe@samaritans.org. The Sinaloa cartel has been described by the US government as the world's most powerful criminal gang and drug trafficking network. But now it's engaged in a brutal power struggle between two warring factions. One group is loyal to Ismael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, and the other, his co-founder, Joaquin Guzman Loera, El Chapo, who was arrested in 2016. According to a gang member, El Mayo's faction is estimated to have 5,000 to 6,000 members, compared to El Chapo's that has between 2,000 to 3,000. El Mayo was abducted in Mexico by one of El Chapo's sons and flown to the United States in July. He was then handed over to the authorities, and Chapo's son turned himself in. It was the ultimate betrayal and has led to a war between the crime families. Sky's chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsey, reports from the headquarters city of the Sinaloa drug cartel, and a warning his report contains footage of dead bodies.
A heavily armed column of state police rumbles through the streets of Culiacan in western Mexico. They're providing extra security around the latest crime scene here. This type of weaponry and armor is the stuff you see in wars. And in many ways, that's exactly what is happening here. A battle between two factions of the Sinaloa drug cartel, one of the most powerful gangs in Mexico, and they're at each other's throats. On a dirt road lie the bodies of two men. They were found at daybreak. Why they were killed isn't known, but people are being murdered across Culiacan every day as this gang war intensifies. A lot of the crime scenes, the authorities tell us, have a message being sent. In this instance, the two bodies have got children's toys on top of them and they're wrapped in blankets. They don't know what that message is, but that is a crime scene as left by the killers. The authorities have had nothing to do with this whatsoever, and all the indicators are, and everyone here believes, and the crime gang themselves tell us, that the war between the two factions is only just getting underway. These women, clearly upset, have come to the scene. The dead still haven't been identified. The police say they could be family, or they could have missing relatives, and they've come to see if it's them. This level of violence hasn't been seen for years. When it flares up, everyone across this city, this state, and further afield is affected.
Al momento que se genera una violencia, como le digo, de alto impacto y que se generaliza en la ciudad.
Whenever there are high-impact violent events and they are generalized in the city or in different parts of the state, it's very possible there will be social and economic impacts. Because businesses close, people can't go out. It impacts life.
Las personas no salen a las calles y pudiera haber un impacto de esa índole.
Forensics officers painstakingly assess the scene of the crime and inspect the bodies as they try to ascertain how they were killed. Eventually, the bodies are zipped into bags and taken away. 2 more murder investigations added to a growing list. The streets of Culiacan are virtually deserted. These are main roads in the centre of a big city. People are too scared to go out. It's as simple as that. Locals say it's quieter now than even at the height of the COVID pandemic. In reality, gang wars are far more lethal. Across the city in their safe houses, gang members plan their next murders. These are 2 senior sicarios, hitmen, who run a base for hitmen. They warn this war is only just starting.
One of the two has to prevail. They are attracting large numbers. The government is sending soldiers. This is just the beginning. It's going to be long. We don't know how long. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe. It will go on for a long time.
This is a war over the future of the Sinaloa cartel, and both factions, the Chapo and Mayo crime families, accept it'll only end when there is a clear winner.
It's just getting started. One of the parties has to die for it to end. One of either side has to die. There has to be a winner.
Another crime scene. 2 cartel lookouts on motorbikes keep their eyes on the movements of military and police. The gangs are fighting each other, but the security forces can get caught in the middle. A military convoy was engaged by a convoy of cartel men travelling through town. They abandoned one of their armoured vehicles, riddled with bullets. A short distance away, a soldier was killed, his weapons visible on the road where he died. Another murder scene and another forensic investigation, documenting a cycle of violence with no obvious end in sight. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Culiacan, Sinaloa.
Reform UK are holding their first party conference since their breakthrough at the general election. The party now have 5 MPs, including their leader, Nigel Farage. Sky's Darren McCaffrey has been speaking to Mr Farage about what the party has achieved since entering Parliament and what his ambitions are for the future.
A party that can hardly believe its success. Perhaps unsurprising, having won over 4 million votes and with 5 new MPs. But it is also a party that claims it's got bigger ambitions, that it's fighting for power.
We do not need to change the mind of a single person living in this country. Because the silent majority is already with us on the key issues that we care about.
Why do you think it's got the ability to win people over? I mean, they've had the chance.
Because it talks the language of the real people. And when we're called far right, it's balderdash.
Politics is a serious business. Let's have a bit of a laugh and some fun and some colour and some enthusiasm.
But away from the conference hall, for a party that knows it needs to attract new voters, members seem fixated on picking the same issue, guided by the same leader at the helm.
Can I offer you a sweet? It comes with a question. That's okay. What's most important to you?
Immigration, without a doubt.
Stop the boats.
We need to start deporting illegal immigrants in big, heavy numbers.
This island's going to sink one of these days. There are far too many people living on it.
What do you think of Nigel Farage?
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, you know, he's the British equivalent of Trump, isn't he, really?
You're the man who's brought this party back. It is all about you, isn't it?
It's not all about me, no. I mean, there's,
OK, largely about you.
Well, no, I've brought in fresh talent. I don't want it to be a one-man party. Look, this is not a presidential system. If it was, I might think differently about it. But no, it's not. We have to be far more broadly based.
Do you honestly think you can be the next Prime Minister?
I think it's possible, yeah.
You honestly do?
It may not be probable, but it's certainly possible, yeah.
Support for Farage's style and his policies are rock solid within Reform. But if the party's going to carry on celebrating...
Are you going to have a drink later, Nigel?
I can have a drink. Am I ever?
It also realises it's going to have to focus its attention elsewhere too. Darren McCaffrey, Sky News in Birmingham.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of the Mail. Its headline, Starmer hit by calamity hole. We'll be right back with that story and others. Do stay with us.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win. Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. First look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the allegations of sexual assault against former Harrods owner Mohammed Al-Fayed, including claims he preyed on hundreds, make the front page of The Sun. The Mirror also leads on the accusations aimed at the now-deceased billionaire, calling him a monster. The U-turn from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and his top team on accepting donations for clothes after public backlash leads The Times. A poll saying Sir Keir's popularity has plummeted amid the outrage over his acceptance of thousands of pounds of freebies is on the front of the Mail. And also on that story, The Telegraph leads with admissions from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, that she too accepted freebies. Fears over how the elderly will cope without winter fuel payments are on the front page of The Express, saying 86% of the poorest pensioners will lose financial help. Claims that the UK will have to give young Europeans 4-year visas in return for a softer Brexit trade deal are on the front of The Eye. The Financial Times leads with fiscal gloom as public debt hits 100% of GDP for the first time since the 1960s. And a brain surgeon's claim that during a week-long coma, he went to heaven and it smelt like fried chicken features on the front of The Star. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Anita Boateng. Welcome to you both. Let us start with The Times and Labour's woes over freebies running up to their conference. Sir Keir Starmer and his top team announcing tonight that they will not be accepting freebies for clothes, at least.
Yes, anymore. The ones they've got is fine. They've got the wardrobes full now. They were waiting for a bit to get the final delivery in. Obviously, Every wasn't delivering on time or something. I'm trying to make too much light of this because, you know, there are people who take a political view and they'll say, look, you know, the Tories did far worse and there was far more corruption. And then there are other people will say, well, look, they got elected on the back of a lot of public disgust with corruption and so on, and seemed to be on the take by the last government. So you've got to be whiter than white. And then there's people saying, well, look, they're not going to be wearing a hair shirt. I do think that we treat particularly the women involved in this, the female politicians and Mrs. Starmer, we treat them, or the media, I should say, treats them like they are a constant moving target. What is she wearing today? You know, I wanted to talk about it, and Sam Cam had it, and Cherie Blair had it, and they've all had it. And I've got a great list of, I think you do have to have some clothes gifted, donated, that your part of that role maybe is to represent British fashion, and that is something that should be done.
But it's about
leave
clothes.
Those poor women alone,
it's about
generally
clothes
speaking.
for the Prime Minister as well.
Clothes for politicians. But, you know, Rachel Reeves is going to get far more attention, especially if she wears the same suit from Georgia Asda every day for a week, like some of us might do, you know, and they can't go out and do the school run wearing
other
scuzzy
suits
sweatpants.
are available from other outlets as well.
You have to do it. But I do worry that this Christmas they're all going to be like house elves, terrified of getting a present of socks, and they won't want to receive anything. They're now saying we won't have any more freebies, but... you know, they have got a process. They do get offered loads of stuff. I think the fundamental problem here is the messaging, the communications. The fact this was clearly going to happen and be made a fuss of was handled really badly. The insistence that they weren't going to do it anymore has taken, 4 days to be said.
A week,
sorry. That shouldn't have happened. And Lady Starmer, frankly, I think she needs an office of her own in Downing Street to protect her from some of this, because as the wife of the Prime Minister, and as we'll see later as well with Sue Gray, the women that are involved in this get a far load more of abuse, especially about their clothing, the way they look, how they behave, than some of the men do. And I think at the moment she's probably just getting helped by some of the Downing Street team, and they're busy doing the country stuff. She needs someone to look after her. So it's been a bit unfair, but they have handled it badly. There you go.
Anita, in terms of the broader story, we read that the Prime Minister's, the new stance, the announcement that they made this evening, he doesn't include giving up hospitality, such as football tickets.
Yeah, it's really funny. I've really seen a division in which of these two things is more egregious to politicians, journalists, secondariat, partly depending on gender. Because from my perspective, I think that I'm actually, when you look at the office of the Prime Minister, there is a lot of work that has to go into people thinking about how a Prime Minister, particularly a female Prime Minister, looks. They get no support with their hair or their makeup, which sounds trivial, but actually really matters for the amount they're in the public eye. And I've always found that incredibly unhelpful, actually, and takes up a lot more time than you would expect from people who are not qualified and paid to do those jobs. That, to me, and the clothing issue is very, very distinct from the Arsenal thing, which is honestly baffling to me, because I totally get that Keir Starmer is a fan of Arsenal, but he talked about when he became Prime Minister, public service is a privilege. I'm going to restore respect and a sense of service to politics, and talking about doing the job with humility, and then sort of goes, well, it's ridiculous that I can't go to a live Arsenal match. And I'm like, well, you do get to be the Prime Minister. It feels to me as though £35,000 spent in hospitality so he can watch a live Arsenal match doesn't feel to me to be the right balance here. Of course you want the Prime Minister to have downtime, but this is not about the Prime Minister going and supporting cultural institutions, going to concerts, going to theatre. That's really important for the Prime Minister's hinterland, for his experience and appreciation of Britain. This is just a man being a fan of Arsenal, which is absolutely fine. And incidentally, there have been instances of Prime Ministers like Sunak actually going into the stands and making that work. But the idea that every single week he has to watch this game live and has to be in a box, I'm just not sure that that's actually appropriate as the right balance. Because the question about integrity is not about whether you follow the rules. It's about the guiding principle. And when you've got a situation where people are disillusioned with politics, and I actually don't believe at all that politicians, especially not Starmer, is out on the take and just wants, what he can get. But this kind of thing, I think, is just there's a lack of judgment here that feels quite profound to me. And I still, I asked a Labour politician, why can't Keir Starmer pay for his glasses? And I don't think I've got an answer to that question.
I got mine from glasses. Well, I can't say where from. Mine were like 20 quid. Plus the lenses, it cost a bit more. But what you get? Has he got Tony Stark's glasses and they're like
Can
AI?
Can you read articles on his glasses? Yeah. It's actually, I think it was £4 grand.
Call in a drone strike.
Susie, let's bring in the Telegraph, because they mention a point that you brought up as to whether some of this will be paid back now. They're quoting actually a Labour MP saying that, if it was wrong then, they've changed their stance, but if it was wrong then, or you decided it's wrong now, then you should repay the money.
And the fact that there's a really simple argument here, and Anita summed it up. If we expect these people to be in the public eye, to be a certain standard of presentation, I think we could probably all agree, Boris Johnson was a shambling mess of a wardrobe when he walked, and it was embarrassing as London Mayor and as Prime Minister that he was wearing the same old creased suit, and several times I think he was reported wearing the same socks day after day after day. It was foul, right? And but when you're very posh, you can be incredibly scruffy and you don't give a damn. There's points being made by one MP, I think, in the Times. When you've worked a bit harder to get there, you feel you have to present yourself better and you have to fill the role and wear the clothes. I think there is a good argument, and this doesn't seem to be a transaction. It's not like someone's given them clothes to get something back. There's been no sign of that. It's someone who's just said, my God, you need some clothes. Here's my card.
Donors, isn't it?
Exactly.
But Anita, just to the Mail, because we're running out of time, just in terms of Sir Keir Starmer's popularity, it does seem to have been hit somewhat.
Yes, and I think it's the cack-handedness and the fact that they've now decided to say they're going to stop taking them, and the fact they basically didn't find any ways to create any safeguards around this. And I think it is actually significant that Starmer's popularity does seem to be waning very, very soon into his leadership. What are we at? 70 something? Yeah, days into his premiership. And it feels as though, you know, a lot of chatter around Westminster, around the doom and gloom around the government as a whole. There is a scandal around clothing, also the scandal that's up at the top of the Mail about, you know, Sue Gray. And a feeling of malaise seems to have descended on this party that is, you know, coming into its first conference as a government in 14 years, which should be the exact opposite. And I think that does actually matter because it infects the mood when you're supposed to be having 3 or 4 days just to simply set out your stall at a party conference.
Susie, take us to the Mirror. Front page, Al-Fayed was a monster.
Yeah, what more is there to say? So Fayed's dead. His victims now feel able to speak out in a way they couldn't when he was alive. And although there's no justice really for them, what there may possibly be is that there will have been people around Fayed who perhaps facilitated what he was doing. And they may still be around and may still have some questions to answer. There's obviously also the fact that he was spoken to by the police several times and they weren't able to proceed. There should be reviews of those decisions. I think it was early, mid-noughties, before 2010, that those interviews happened. So the chances are that things are very different now. Post-Weinstein, post-Savile, there'll be a different attitude in the CPS. There might be something looking there. But also, let's remember, some of this offending happened before the death of Princess Diana in '97, and while there was still...
Yeah, we must just say it's alleged offending.
Alleged offending.
These are allegations.
Well, I don't think he's going to sue us. But just, you know, while these alleged allegations were going on, there were still 4 royal warrants on the outside of Harrods. And there was a report today in some of the papers that the palace was made aware of some of these issues while Diana was alive because Diana was doting his son. So, you know, how much did the royal family know? And why were there royal warrants stuck on the outside of Harrods when this is what was going on inside, and how many people did know about it?
Still lots of question marks, and that story I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about in the coming weeks and months. Susie and Anita, for the moment, thank you very much. Coming up, more of the morning's newspapers, including this on the front of the Express. Their headline, heartless. 86% of poorest pensioners will lose fuel help. Stay with us for more.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'm gonna have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here.
They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community. Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake, might all be finished, I don't know.
Trust in politics is at an all-time low. What's going wrong and can we fix it? It's from Liz. She wants to know, why is there still no sign of the Labour Party electing a woman as leader?
It's sort of embarrassing. You know, it takes a very strong man to be leader, but it takes an even stronger man to support a woman for leader.
If you want to be mean to politicians, like, crack on. The activists that go out and make elections happen, I kind of feel like just don't be horrible to them. Be polite to them in the same way that they're polite to you.
Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the two-child benefit policy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along.
I went up to Gordon Brown and said, hello? No, yes, where is it? I said, found all these Tory candidates breaking land. Let me see it, let me see it. This is brilliant, brilliant.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, Susie Boniface and Anita Boateng. So let's take a look at the Express, shall we? And their headline, heartless. 86% of poorest pensioners will lose fuel help, describing the Labour government as heartless for putting them in this situation. Anita.
Yes, I mean, so the rumblings over winter fuel payments, even though the big vote over whether or not to proceed with this has taken place, I think there is still some political disquiet, and certainly that you have the opposition parties who are determined to keep pursuing this as a way to really either force the government into a U-turn or to kind of make political hay out of it. But there is, it's worth remembering, at the heart of this, a lot of pensioners who are looking forward to quite a tough winter because of the reality of the cost of energy these days. So this new data seems to have come partly from the government. Emma Reynolds from the Department for Work and Pensions saying that actually there are 1.4 million older pensioners living in poverty. And then I think the Conservative extrapolating from that actually 200,000 people are receiving pensions credit, and therefore you have, 86% of people, according to his piece, who are already in poverty that could lose their energy payments. And I think that focus on that vulnerable group of people is going to continue coming into the winter, especially because Labour did some research back in 2017 when there were rumours that the Conservatives were going to, government at the time, were going to withdraw universal winter fuel payments, saying that 3,850 people would die as a result of that policy. And that language and that rhetoric is coming back again at this critical time.
But Susie, we're not going to see a U-turn on this.
I don't think so. But again, it's a massive failure of messaging, which is... I could go into huge detail about what's going wrong in government at the moment. But although there's 1.4 million people in absolute poverty, which is people who cannot afford to pay for the necessities of life, food and water, like heating, light, this stuff like that, 1.2 of them aren't on pension credits. Therefore, the Express says they would lose their winter fuel payments. However, there are 2.3 million people in this country who are older, who are pensioners, who should have the pension tax credit. And about 880,000 of them do not claim it at all. So a large chunk of those 1.2 million, which the Express are talking about here, should be on pension tax credit, are not on pension tax credit for a variety of reasons. Either they don't know they qualify, or they'd rather just have the immediate payment of the winter fuel payment without having to fill in the forms for the pension tax credit and go through the means testing. But my problem with this is not that there's... The story is right, it's accurate, it's slightly slanted, but it's accurate. But the Express and its readership is all way in here, when you go into the paper, it's talking about help save winter fuel payments, fill in this form, send off, campaign with us, we're going to fight to get it back, which isn't going to work. But there's nothing in here which says Do you qualify for pension tax credits? Here's how you apply. There are 880,000 people who will be suffering and may contribute to those deaths that you mentioned, who are not being helped to apply. And that's what the government has to do. It has to say, you need to get this, and then you get you into fuel payment.
Quickly get in this story in the eye. Anita, the price that Sir Keir Starmer is going to have to pay for a softer Brexit is in about 20 seconds.
Yes, a youth mobility scheme. So what's fascinating about this is the EU are very keen on a youth mobility scheme. It basically means that international students do not have to pay international fees to come to university in the UK, which is a big difference between UK fees and international fees. And also, lots of international students can learn English. And so the EU continues to kind of dangle this over the head of Keir Starmer in the hope they can lure him into wanting the things that he wants, like a veterinary agreement and a softer Brexit. So that's what's being pushed in the eye.
Well done. In the time allotted as well. Anita and Susie, thank you very much for the moment. Let's take a look at the weather for you now. Well, there is a risk of heavy and thundery showers in the south this weekend, but there will be some warm and sunny spells elsewhere. However, it will be a grey start for many on Saturday morning, with low cloud and drizzle for many central and eastern areas. Further south, a scattering of heavy showers will affect parts of England and Wales. Low cloud will linger near North Sea coast tomorrow. Otherwise, much of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England will be dry with warm, sunny spells. However, it will feel increasingly humid in the south as bands of heavy, thundery downpours move into England and Wales. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, the Israeli military say they've killed a leading Hezbollah commander in an airstrike in Lebanon.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes. Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win. Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.